Nadine worked in the call center at Gamora Pharmaceuticals, deep inside an old building buried in an industrial park. She wasn't one of the glamorous drug reps. She wasn't one of the polished executives. She was just a sweet, nervous telemarketer spending her days on the phone setting appointments for prettier, more persuasive women to go sell pills to doctors. That was the only job she had ever known, but today was moving day. U-Haul trucks were lining up outside the old building. Chartered buses were hauling employees downtown. Gamora was leaving its tired old industrial nest and moving into a shiny new glass showplace in the city. And on the one day when everybody was supposed to go together, Nadine missed her bus. So instead of riding with the other workers, Nadine was picked up by a limousine. And in the back of that limousine sat Bella, Nedry, and Kevin. Bella was cool, elegant, and severe in that way only rich women in a corporate nightmare can be. Nedry looked expensive, spoiled, and vaguely irritated just to be alive. And Kevin, sitting across from them in the back of the limousine, looked like exactly what he was, a well-dressed bodyguard with bad instincts and worse plans. In the back of the limousine, Bella decided almost immediately that Nadine was amusing. The old executive secretary had vanished without warning, and Bella, after taking in Nadine's innocence, decided on the spot that this shy little call center girl would now be working upstairs in the C-suite. Nadine was horrified. She tried to explain, right there in the back of the limousine, that she only knew how to work the phones. That was the only job she had ever had. She didn't know anything about executive work. But Bella had already made up her mind. Nedry hated the idea. In the back of the limousine, Nedry started grumbling that executive floors should only have beautiful women on display, not homely telemarketers, because what would guests think? Bella shut that down immediately and reminded him that employees were not a beauty contest for executives' perverted appetites. And then, right there in the back of the limousine, Nedry made an even bigger mistake. Without thinking, he let slip that they were carrying a box of valuable jewels for the senator. Kevin, sitting across from them in the back of the limousine, took note of that, quietly, suspiciously, scheming. By the time the limousine reached the new building, Nadine had already been promoted, terrified, and dragged into a world far above her pay grade. At the new downtown headquarters, Nadine got lost almost immediately. She wandered through polished hallways carrying a little box of personal desk things, looking completely out of place in this giant mirrored palace of ambition and corruption. That was when she met Junior. Junior was sweet, harmless, and already oddly at home in the building. He had been helping move things in for days, and he happily took it upon himself to help Nadine find the C-suite and her new desk. On the way upstairs, Junior cheerfully told Nadine that the basement had a lab full of cool stuff, and the penthouse had the old man's private hospital room. That did not comfort her. By the time Junior left her at her new desk, Nadine was already certain she had never been more intimidated in her life. She was wrong, of course, but she didn't know that yet. Meanwhile, in another limousine on the way downtown, Stebner was riding with the old man. Stebner was already deep in his own world, thinking about drug trials, chemical formulas, and the human testing for Ophidian. The old man, meanwhile, was in one of his expansive moods. In the back of that second limousine, the old man explained that the new Gamora building had once belonged to a military contractor who went bankrupt because their experimental robots were too loud for military use. That got Stebner's attention. The old man told him that the basement was still full of abandoned military experiments, robot parts, and all kinds of strange junk that Stebner would probably enjoy. Stebner was interested, but only up to a point. He was still worried about the trials for Ophidian. The old man told him, coldly and confidently, that everything was taken care of, and then the senator climbed into the limousine. By the time everybody settled into their new positions in the building, Gamora was beginning to look like a proper empire, and then armed men took over the executive floor. The takeover happened fast. Bella, Nadine, Kevin, the old man, the senator, and several executives were rounded up and held hostage in the C-suite. Nedry was elsewhere, Junior was elsewhere, Stebner was elsewhere, and the armed men wanted only one thing, something in the basement. Specifically, they wanted a time machine. Nadine, standing there in the middle of a hostage crisis on what was essentially her first day upstairs, quietly pointed out that there was no such thing as time travel because you couldn't change the past. One of the gunmen explained that this machine only went forward. Nadine, still trying to be helpful during the hostage crisis in the executive suite, wondered what good that was. Then the gunman explained that it could come back, and that made perfect sense to Nadine. In the middle of the hostage crisis, in the executive suite, Nadine started excitedly listing all the practical uses she could think of. You could eat a double Whopper with cheese and then come back to before you ate it. You could break a dish and then go back to before you broke it. You could date a boy, find out he cheats on you, and then go back and not date him. The gunman told her to shut up and be quiet. Nadine apologized. That was when Kevin made his move. In the middle of the hostage crisis, in the executive suite, Kevin coolly informed the gunman that there was also a box of jewels in the building, and they could simply take the jewels and leave. The senator was furious, because those jewels were supposedly meant for him. But Kevin wasn't thinking about the senator anymore. Kevin offered to tell the gunmen where the jewels were if they took him with them. And just like that, the bodyguard switched sides. Outside, the police arrived much faster than expected. Now it wasn't a robbery, now it was a full hostage situation. Meanwhile, in the penthouse, Nedry and Junior had found an Atari. It was a primitive little top-down boxing game, ancient-looking even for its own time, and the two of them sat there happily playing while the entire executive floor was turning into a siege. Nedry was taking it far too seriously. Junior was just enjoying himself. Meanwhile, in the dark basement, Stebner had finally found the abandoned lab. There were tarps, crates, broken equipment, and military leftovers everywhere, and under one tarp sat a huge glass box that looked much too important to have been left behind. Nearby, in another container, Stebner discovered a heavy mechanical humanoid frame with claws and pistons, unfinished, ominous, and missing its head. This was the basement robot. At that point, there was no power in the basement. Stebner found the breakers, turned them on, and brought the whole lab to life. Lights flickered on, circuits woke up, systems reactivated. And up in the penthouse, the Atari changed. Suddenly the game was no longer in two-player mode. Nedry was kicked out. Nedry, furious at being ejected from the game in the penthouse, stormed downstairs. Junior stayed with the Atari, trying to understand what had happened. Now, in the penthouse, Junior's little blocky player on the screen seemed to be trapped in a box. So Junior started punching. He punched and punched and punched, trying to break his little fighter out. And down in the basement, another, more functional basement robot was doing the same thing for real. Inside its crate, the basement robot came alive and started smashing its way out. Sparks flew, steam burst, metal screamed. Stebner, now fully aware that he had powered up something he absolutely should not have powered up, ran for his life. He fled upstairs and ran straight into the hostage crisis. At this point, things were getting worse everywhere at once. The armed men were still demanding whatever was in the basement. The police were outside. The hostages were trapped. Kevin was playing both sides. Nedry had blundered into the crisis. Stebner had joined the crisis by accident. And in the penthouse, Junior was still unknowingly controlling the basement robot with the Atari. Back in the executive suite, the gunmen decided they were leaving with hostages. They were going to take Bella, they were going to take Nadine, they were going to take Kevin, and they were going to take the jewels. Then everyone heard it. From somewhere below came the sound of heavy mechanical banging, then steam, then sparks, then a violent metallic stomping that seemed to shake the whole building. Everybody stopped and stared toward the C-suite lobby, and in the penthouse, Junior finally managed to punch his little player out of the box. Now his character was free, wandering the game grid, looking for opponents. The basement robot was doing exactly the same thing. It wandered halls, up and down stairways, sensors shifting, targeting, and then it appeared in the C-suite lobby. Huge, violent, sparking, steaming, a monster. Nadine looked at it and asked the obvious question. Was that in the basement too? The gunmen recognized it instantly. That was the truly bad part. They didn't react like ordinary men seeing an impossible machine. They reacted like men who knew exactly what the basement robot was. And then they started fighting it. In the penthouse, Junior happily found some opponents on the Atari and started punching. Down in the executive suite, the basement robot tore into the armed men with industrial brutality. It was no longer a hostage situation. It was a massacre. The basement robot ripped them apart with its claws, while everyone else scattered for cover. Bella screamed. Nadine screamed louder. Stebner got covered in blood. The senator disappeared somewhere beneath furniture. And all the while, Junior kept playing upstairs, delighted that the game had suddenly become interesting. Then Junior heard the real screaming from below. He dropped the Atari and ran downstairs. The moment Junior let go of the controls in the penthouse, the basement robot shut down, just like that. 1 second it was a roaring mechanical nightmare, the next second it was dead, silent. Now the executive suite was quiet except for dripping blood, scattered body parts, and the sound of people trying not to panic. That was when Kevin seized control again. Armed now and fully committed to his own survival plan, Kevin forced Nedry, Bella, Junior, Nadine, the old man, and Stebner down into the basement with the box of jewels. In the basement, Kevin pointed at the glass box and demanded to know if that was the time machine. Stebner, still dazed by the existence of everything in the room, could only answer, "The what?" Kevin forced Nadine into the glass box. Then Kevin demanded to know how it worked. Stebner, still standing in the basement lab surrounded by blood and impossible machines, could only shout back, "How does what work?" But then Kevin saw the controls inside the box, and the controls looked simple enough to make a bad idea feel actionable. So Kevin stopped asking questions. In the basement lab, Kevin climbed into the glass box with Nadine and started entering a destination date like he was operating a movie prop. April 1st, 2037. The machine began to hum, the box began to shake, blue energy started crawling through the lab. And inside the glass box, Nadine did the only thing she could do. She fought. She kicked Kevin with her heels, shoved past him, forced the door open, and spilled the box of jewels all over the basement floor. Nadine escaped. Kevin did not. The glass box slammed shut with Kevin still inside, then the machine vanished in a storm of blue time displacement effects. The basement went quiet. Everybody stood there in disbelief, covered in blood, staring at the empty place where Kevin had just been. And in the silence, Nadine quietly and calmly reflected. I really don't like this job. Nedry, still somehow the dumbest person in the room, looked around and asked where Kevin had gone. Bella answered first. The future? The future where? The old man, staring at the empty space where the machine had vanished in the basement lab, said that Kevin had probably gone right there, to that same lab, only 50 years in the future, assuming the building was still standing. That was when Stebner realized something the others had not. No, he explained, the building would not still be there, and the Earth would not still be there either, at least not relative to the fixed point that Box had just used. Kevin, Stebner realized, was probably nowhere near Earth at all. Kevin was probably somewhere far beyond the Oort cloud by now, while the Earth was very, very far away. Bella asked the next obvious question. Didn't they say it could come back? Stebner looked over and noticed Junior holding the frayed remains of the power umbilical that had once been feeding the box. At that point, Stebner understood exactly what had happened. The return path was gone. He looked at Bella and gave the best possible answer. I don't think so. Junior, holding the dead cable in the basement lab, delivered the final judgment. Wump, wump. And then we cut to Kevin. Kevin was on his hands and knees inside the glass box, but there was no building, no downtown, no Earth, only open space. Nebulas rolled around him in the dark. The Milky Way stretched across the void. Strange distant structures glimmered out there like things no man was ever supposed to see. Kevin looked around in horror, then he looked down and realized something even worse. He didn't even have the jewels. And finally, alone in the glass box in deep space, Kevin did the only thing left to do. He screamed. So that was how the whole Gamora nightmare really began, with a missed bus, a limousine promotion, a hostage crisis, an Atari game in the penthouse, a monster in the basement, and one bodyguard just greedy enough to trust a time machine he found under a tarp. At Gamora Pharma, moving day had actually gone quite well, all things considered, and so the company settled into its new home. The blood was cleaned. The reports were rewritten, the jewels were recollected, the dead were explained, and somewhere far from home, drifting in the dark between one bad decision and the next, Kevin discovered that at Gamora Pharmaceuticals, the benefits package was poor, the upward mobility was sudden, and the exit strategy was out of this world.